I'd like to introduce Mr. Abdul. We have met him on a joint lead session with Water for People during the Stockholm Water Week. And we thought this needs more attention and a bigger audience. So therefore we're really very proud and pleased that Abdul is here. And he will share his story about flow and the mapping of the water points, more than 10,000 in a half a year. And he will share his experience with us. So I'm very pleased to have you here. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, brother. Wow. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here and be sharing the experiences of Liberia using flow to map our water points. And I hope afterwards we can have some charged discussions around going forward with the systems for updating and all of that. Do I have help with this, or I'm driving my own car? So I just thought to give a small background about what led to mapping water points. It's really good at this time for you to know that the idea wasn't just about mapping. So it was how can we map water points and use the data for equity and investment planning. And so pretty much around 2003, after we sort of recovered from 14 years of civil war, it was very important that we start to think seriously about planning in the context of development. And as I've been saying earlier, we needed to have very strong data that could support the planning process. And so more realistically, we pretty much went to a period we normally call development or rehabilitation support period, where INGOs, DPs were no longer carrying out implementation, but rather following through with country systems and supporting what governments thought or was the best approach to the interventions that took place in the water supply and sanitation sector. And so about this time, there became an urgent need for data, and this led to a partnership between the government of Liberia, UNICEF, and WSP. And so a lot of discussions went around exactly how are we going to do a full water census. Because if we needed to plan for 5 years, then it meant we needed to know exactly issues around access, coverage, and exactly how much population was being served by the water points that were existing, and we also needed to know whether those water points were in fact functional and whether they were serving the population at large. And so through this partnership, we carried out the water point mapping project. And it was after the project that we got a lot of results that we used to plan for water supply and sanitation. I'm just going to show you a little bit of what the results were and then go directly into how we use flow to achieve this process. So the results show that we mapped a total of 10,000 points in total. About 63.7% of those water points were functional. There was 11% of those water points that were functional, but we created this category because it was important to note that while it's true that these water points were working, they had some little problems. So there were issues around whether these water points were holding enough water throughout the year, whether there were pump problems. And so we actually had to create this category to show that, yeah, they are functional, but there are some problems around this. And obviously, you have the reds. These are broken down points completely. So you've done the mappings, but it was also important to know that communities that live within those the corridors where water points were not working were obviously not served. So this led to us making some decisions around how investments can be done. So just as an overall, 10,000 points were mapped, And the sort of detailed information we were able to get could only have been possible using the software Flow and the sort of real-time updates that we're able to get from the field. Beyond the water point mapping, we went and did a water quality testing, which was able to also guide the process of how INGOs, and really what we were able to get from water quality testing was that water points that were being built, we had to know whether the population consuming or drinking from those water points were actually, they were safe water points or not. And it was through the water point data that we're able to go back into the field and do a water quality testing of these points. So we didn't do all 10,000 points, but we were able to do parts of Monrovia, and we were able to get out some very terrible results, like E. coli infestation up to like 59.2% present in the points that we mapped or that we tested. The interesting part about the mapping was, it wasn't just about, as I said earlier, going into map water points and create a beautiful map that people could say, ah, yeah, you have a water point map, it looks very beautiful. But I mean, if no one was using this data to plan, then it calls for serious thoughts. Because the idea, as I said from the initial stage, was to get data to plan. So going beyond mapping, it was very crucial to the government's own mandate to see that partners were using this data. And in the next few slides I'm about to show you, you will see the large extent to which this data has been used. And just before going into that, I'd like to just say briefly one-on-one experience that we had with some of the partners. There was an NGO working in a county called Lofa, and it's a very big area in Liberia. But there was no data, as we said. So normally what happened was that ACF go into this county and just select where they're going to work. So this was not based on any planning, any sort of detailed analysis of where they needed to go. So just about, I think this place looked nice, we should work there, it's good to work in. And we were able to call them to the table and say, look, you're about to work in this district, but interestingly, from the new information we've got, they covered up to like 90% in terms of access. So we really don't know what you're going to do there. So if you need to go somewhere in the same county, these are the districts you should be looking at. And they were very surprised that, we have this huge resource and we didn't know about it. I'm like, yeah, that's the second part of mapping. You need to like popularize that data sufficiently so that people know exactly that it exists. Otherwise, you won't have anyone using them. So in terms of how it was used, you see that the government of Liberia actually started to pilot, it was done in only 2 counties. So it was a hand pump maintenance management strategy. That was about looking at this data. We've seen how many water points have broken down. Can we go in and work with communities to see how we can have a maintenance, instill a maintenance regime for these water points so that community dwellers can be able to, repair these water points once they have the spare part depots within a reasonable area, and they can actually use their cash box systems, collect money, and repair their own hand pumps. And we thought that we could pilot that and see whether what sort of results we could get. And we had to use the water point mapping data to do that. UNICEF has used this extensively. Up to last week, they were using this data to plan for a very big proposal they are writing. The civil society has been able to use this to also, and I was talking about this earlier, a lot of county officials receive money for water, sanitation, and hygiene in Liberia, but now they didn't know anything about the status of water points. So in most cases, that money went to the things that they could do that could be visible, like roads, all right? So it's very common in Liberia. If you go, you see a lot of people spending money on roads because it's easier to see. You can see the roads there. People are working, and you can score some political points with all of these things. So, but civil society, especially this group, were able to use the water point mapping data to convince people that, look, even though you have the money for WASH, and you really don't know what the next steps are, and so you just turn to the easier things. Maybe this is what coverage looks like, and if you just invest some of this money into building some water points, and in some cases we had done some rehabilitation optimistic scenarios. So instead of constructing 5 new water points, you just have to reconstruct or rehabilitate maybe 3 of those ones that were broken down, and so it reduces the cost. So we're able to feed this information to civil society, and they use that information to work with county authorities. There's a long list of our NGOs, both national and international, that have been using the data, and for quite a number of reasons, to inform their interventions into the different counties. This is almost like a private company that went into Liberia early this year, and they're supposed to do a consultancy for USAID for 3 cities. And the very first thing that they actually laid their hands on to inform everything that they were doing was the water point mapping data. So instead of going, as part of their budget, they had planned to do a mapping of these 3 cities. But with the availability of water point mapping data, they obviously had to sort of reduce their cost, and they could actually put that money to something else other than doing a mapping, and you know, it reduced the timeline of the entire project implementation. I'll talk about the website later.